as you know, we somewhat jokingly call this program the Information Project, a name that we came up with 2.5 years ago, Ben, as a direct challenge and a direct middle finger to a group called the Disinformation Project. The Disinformation Project, always pretty shady to be honest, was a collection of Marxist, and they were Marxist, all you had to do was read their background stuff, Marxist academics who were seconded effectively to the Prime Minister's department by Jacinda Ardern, given hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and appointed to be, this was 4 years ago, appointed to be this country's Ministry of Truth. They advised our police and our security apparatus on what they considered to be seditious activity or dangerous activity. And they were embraced entirely by a corrupted and bribed mainstream media and were appointed the experts in online trolling, fascist activity, and white supremacy. They were, I think, the apex organisation of wokeness, of the Orwellian dystopia that Labor and the Greens, under basically the leadership of Jacinda Ardern and the non-leadership of Mr. Shaw, sought to create. The transformative New Zealand would be fact-checked and approved by the non-elected commissars of the Disinformation Project. Who were they led by? With a woman who had written essays about women writing diaries in colonial times. A woman called Kate Hanna, who appeared to wash her hands frequently. And a dissident journalist, Marxist from Sri Lanka, called Sanjaya Hatatoa. It was quite remarkable how 4 years ago the Disinformation Project became, for our lazy, corrupted mainstream media, the go-to experts to shout down anyone who wanted to voice a view in any way opposed to the regime that was in government then. The Fire and Fury documentary they featured in greatly, where Kate Hanna, with an absolutely straight face, suggested that women who braided their kids' hair, and if that hair was ginger or blonde, and if they were on Pinterest talking about knitting or handcraft or bottling fruit, they were probably white supremacists and fascists, and it was all part of a very, very dangerous global conspiracy. Our mainstream media, underfunded, bribed by the government, and totally infiltrated by activist young journalists and feminists, lapped this up. And organisations like the Platform, which I've got to say was set up largely to counter this sort of thing, were excluded from the press releases and the wonderful pronouncements of people like Kate Hanna. In fact, Ben, it would be fair to say, despite strenuous efforts to engage with this publicly funded organisation, we were never granted an interview, correct?
Yeah, no, not even close.
And when they were insidiously holding special meetings with the leaders of the mainstream media to discuss how they could censor people and how important hate speech was, and when they were meeting on Marae with Willie Jackson and other ministers, or holding little forums and workshops with the Royal New Zealand Society, which is our apex science body, we were always excluded, never invited, and when we found out and tried to get invited, events were cancelled, because even just having a Platform journalist or me there was going to be dangerous, was going to create risk. They were the ultimate cry bullies. And they embodied everything that was bad about the virtue signalling elite woke revolution that was spearheaded by Jacinda Ardern. I was so glad then to hear over the weekend, though funnily enough, the mainstream media who had feted these people for so long didn't report it, that the Disinformation Project has been closed. No longer will these cultural commissars corrupt democracy and freedom of speech with their insidious and partisan pronouncements. They put out a media release on the 3rd of October, as I said, not picked up really until social media did it over the weekend. And let's read the self-serving propaganda with which they closed their doors. After nearly 4.5 years of pioneering research, analysis and reporting on the growing landscape of disinformation in Aotearoa, of course, the Disinformation Project is closing as our small team moves on to new things. And for that, read, the new government cuts our funding. Please be assured that our public reporting will always remain available for public access. Well, that's funny, you know. You'd make all these claims and then you'd say we can't release our research. It's just too upsetting for people. So never publicly accessible to this organisation. When we started the project in 2020, our focus was on the COVID-19 pandemic and how false information contributed to people's responses to public health interventions. Since then, we have charted the descent of many New Zealanders, not Aotearoans, strangely, into more extreme conspiratorial beliefs. These include widespread vaccine refusal, climate change denial, opposition to immigration, reductive beliefs around gender, anti-Māori racism, and hatred towards the LGBTQ plus community. In 2024, it is clear that the disinformation networks established or expanded during the pandemic are deeply connected to far-right neo-Nazi and accelerationist networks and actors, both domestic and foreign. Disinformation has become more mainstream and more connected to wider issues of political, social division, violence, extremism, and national security. Domestic and foreign influence operators have grown more sophisticated, while gaps in legal, regulatory and policing framework allows for harmful, polarising narratives to conservatively reach hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders daily. And at the same time as disinformation grows, social platforms like X and Meta and Instagram are part of a larger term of companies preventing independent researchers from accessing the open source data they need. This in bold. We want to specifically note the marked increase in polarising and dehumanising rhetoric we've studied since our research began, specifically anti-Māori racism. We witnessed a shift from relatively amateur, individual or small network-based tactics to polished technical strategies for spreading disinformation at scale. Well, you would know all about that, wouldn't you? And then it goes on. And did you know, I never knew this, they say their Director of Communications, Nicole Skews-Poole, Skews being a very apt word for her, continues to... Did you ever know they had a communications officer?
Well, no, certainly not.
Because they never communicated
with us, no.
But look, even their parting shot is an absolute picture-perfect example of propaganda and of the madness, the dystopian madness that was promulgated by this group of Marxist academics. I think the lowest moment in New Zealand's history was a conference which the Disinformation Project was involved in setting up, was attended by the Prime Minister and the then head of our security services, Rebecca Kitteridge, in which the whack job ideas that being on Pinterest and doing flower pot arrangements and braiding your kids' hair was indications that you were a threat to the state. And at that conference, people were encouraged to spy on their families and report them to authorities in case they were politically incorrect. Thank God, those days are over. I invited Kate Hanna on this morning. I rang her twice and left 2 nice messages on her phone over the weekend. And what I got was crickets. But I'm going to give you a warning. People like this don't go away. They go and get a sinecure at a university. They continue their membership of extremist political party organisations. And they wait for the wind to change. And they hide inside charity lobby groups that try and influence school children. And they wait till they can rise again. Goodbye to the Disinformation Project. You will not be missed by me.